You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Good morning, and welcome to Mission Matters Live, a program focused on promoting a spirit of mission among the people of God in the Archdiocese of Chicago. I am Megan Mio, Director of the Global Mission Office in the Archdiocese of Chicago, and our engineers this morning are Mike and Brian. You're listening to WNDZ 750 AM, and this is our new day and time. You will hear Mission Matters on the second Wednesday of the month at 8 a.m. Central. We are blessed this month to have with us Father Michael McAndrew, a Redemptorist priest and missionary who's been engaged in ministry with Hispanic and Latino communities for 32 years. Also known as Padre Migrante, Father Mike is an outspoken advocate for ministry with migrant communities. He is the author of a weblog on padremigrante.org, as well as a book called Migrant Faith. Like the families and communities he accompanies, Father Mike travels and moves all over the U.S. to offer pastoral and spiritual care to people on the move. You may have heard in the news recently that migrants were sent by bus to Chicago from the Texas border region. I thought that having Father Mike with us today, perhaps we can reflect more deeply both on the faith of the migrants like these recent arrivals, and we can reflect on our own faith and what it is calling us to do in a situation like this. So, thank you very much for joining us, Father Mike. Good morning.
Thank you. It's a blessing to be with you.
It is wonderful. Thanks so much for being willing to share your story with us. So let's get started, and let's just get to know you a little bit, Father Mike. Please tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your background?
Well, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm the oldest of 7 children, and I grew up in, I say I grew up in the best Catholic school, the best parish, the best community. And when our cheerleaders would be at the football games, they'd say, "We are Holy Name, couldn't be prouder. If you don't believe it, we'll yell a little louder." It was the largest Catholic school in Omaha at the time. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of vocations from that parish. Mm-hmm. There was about 40 ordinations in that parish in a period of 50 years. Oh. And I was probably towards the end of that group. But we had a lot of guys went to foreign missions in Brazil and Thailand. And whenever they would come home, they would always tell their stories about being in the jungle. And I always thought that would be an adventure. And I thought that would be what I would like to do. Mm-hmm. So I dreamed of being a missionary. I went to the minor seminary right out of grade school. And I went and I found out I had a problem, though. I struggled with Latin. I flunked Spanish. So when my 2 classmates went to Brazil, I went to Wichita, Kansas. And I wasn't probably expected to work in Hispanic ministry in any way. But after 10 years in parishes and 7 years as vocation director, I went to Denver, Colorado, to a parish where we were in a barrio in the center city of Denver. And we opened a house to work with inner city street kids. And we basically said, there's beans on the stove, tortillas in the refrigerator, our house is your house. And the kids came in. And they came. And we said that there was, for every 10 phone calls, 9 were in Spanish, and the other was a wrong number. So I learned Spanish, and very quickly I was engaged in Latino ministry and Latino culture. What I learned from the ministry as I came in was I had to learn the customs, the pains, the struggles, the reasons why these men came up from Mexico or other countries to come to America. I had to know their family structures. Mm-hmm. I had to know their fiestas, what they celebrated. Sometimes we had our house had sort of a bad reputation. We were were often called Casa de las Fiestas because we had too many parties at the house.
That's what you're
It
known
was
for.
a welcoming center for young people, and it worked. I did that for 5 years. The other priest was with me, ended up going to Brazil, and at that point in time, we knew we couldn't continue the ministry. I then started a bilingual mission team where I went to rural communities in Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas. I preached parish missions in the rural areas all across this country, and went to liberal Kansas after that to start Dodge City Diocese Hispanic ministry. We spent there 6 years there. I went to Fresno. I worked with farm workers, migrant farm workers in the fields, and I became the director for multicultural and campesino ministry. And from there, I ended up in Omaha for a short time, starting Hispanic ministry in my home parish, and back to Mississippi after that. And now I'm sort of on. Recently, I was sent to Mexico to study the conditions on the border, on the Mexican side of the border for foreign nationals in Mexico. That's my background.
And how many years have you been in active ministry?
50 years. 50 years as a priest.
Really? Wow. Because I remember you saying that you'd had 30 plus years in Hispanic ministry, but this is really ministry, all kinds of ministry that you've been engaged in.
Right.
50 years.
Right.
Whew. Well, and I said in the introduction that you are on the move like the people that you minister with. It certainly sounds like you've been all over the country and in parts of Mexico too, really trying to be present where the people are, where those folks who are on the margins, would you say, people who are not often the focus of our ministries. Is that right?
I'm grateful for what Pope Francis said in The Joy of the Gospel, when he said that in paragraph 200, he said that one of the saddest things is the lack of pastoral care given to the poor. That's one of the problems we're having.
Yeah. So you're talking about ministering with the poor. And now you said that a lot of your classmates and others that you've ministered with would go on mission in other parts of the world, in Brazil and other areas outside the U.S. But obviously there's missionary work to be done here in the U.S. as well. But, maybe it would be good for our listeners to learn a little bit more about the Redemptorists, also known as the Congregation of the Most Holy Redeemer. And for our Chicago-based folks...
Thank you for bringing me back to that point.
Say again?
Thank you for bringing us back to that point. I'm a Redemptorist.
Yeah.
And my community was founded to work with, we said for the most abandoned, but migrants and immigrants are among the most abandoned. When we began, Alphonsus found the abandoned among the rural poor in Italy.
Yeah.
We came to America, we worked with immigrants. We've come to this time in our journey, and we're working a lot with Hispanic immigrants and with multicultural immigrants from around the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, immigrants from outside the U.S. Yeah, coming in. Well, I wanted to mention to our Chicago folks that we do have Redemptorists here in the Chicago area. They are staffing St. Michael's Parish in Old Town, and the Denver province is actually based here in Chicago, which I know there's a long story about why it's called the Denver province, but it's here in Chicago. But just to let folks know that Redemptorists are missionaries primarily, and are sent to the most, quote unquote, the most abandoned. But what that might be in any particular context could be quite different. So what would you say is unique about being a Redemptorist, and what how does that inform how you serve as a missionary? Who are the types of people who you've been on mission with?
Well, I've been on mission with some very good confreres who've helped me with, and I've been amazed at how many times they've let me experiment, because I've done it with lay missionaries too, and a lot of our guys haven't had that blessing of working with the laity. But I've worked with 2 to 4 lay ministers who traveled with me for 6 years. We traveled around the Midwest in a minivan, and it worked out. I don't know how you could do it today in today's situation of the world, but it was at the time it was a good program, and we would do 1 week in English, 1 week in Spanish. I've been given an opportunity to do a lot of experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kept me alive. It's kept me young. That's one of the things that I enjoy doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, thank you for mentioning that you work with lay folks too. I think it's really important for people to understand it takes all vocations. Ministry and mission work is for all of us. It's not only for the ordained or for the vowed religious, and or the combination of the two. And yeah, I think that we need partners in this. And, that's honestly why the language personally I use when it comes to ministry and mission is that we are on mission and doing ministry with a community, because you need the local community leaders to be part of it. It's not something that I do to somebody else as a minister, that we are always working together and collaboration. And like you say, finding new ideas and new approaches, the community needs to be a big part of that. I wanted to just also comment on your mentioning language and language skills being a really important part of how you wound up ministering in the U.S. and then ultimately Spanish wound up becoming a part of it anyway. You mentioned something to me about learning the Spanish language and ministry with Hispanic communities. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Well, I had to learn the language of the people that are here. I had to learn Mexican Spanish because that's who I was working with,
yeah.
And I had to understand that when you work with people from around the world, it's not always exactly the same. It was a matter of also learning about their culture and their story.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm working with folks from Central America, I'm working with people who've experienced a lot of maybe difficult crises that have moved them to come here to the United States, wars and real violence. Yeah. Where when I'm working with a lot of the Mexicans that I've worked with, it's more the local gangs and some violence, but oftentimes it's family unification, wanting to be with their family, reuniting with people that have come up to the States before. Mm-hmm. So it's a different world. And I mean, when I say language, it's I don't want to be the Catalan snob. I want to be the one who understands that our language is going to be different from one culture to another.
Yeah.
It's got to be we got to talk with the people we're talking with in a way that honors them.
Yeah, no.
And they laugh at us when we screw it up.
Yeah. You got to have a sense of humor about it for sure. I know with the many missionaries that I've spoken with, language has come up many times. I think mm-hmm. learning a new language, learning the language of a new community that you've entered into is a sign of respect, is an effort to reach out and to understand people a little better. But I also would say, like you've just stated, it's more than just learning the language. It is about really listening to people's stories and getting to know them at a deeper level. Because I think that's how the ministries develop out as well, right? As you find out that a community has had these traumas, then you say, okay, maybe there is a need here that we've identified, having listened a little bit more carefully to what the folks have to say. So wonderful. And I think we're going to learn more about some of those experiences that you've had a little bit later in our program. You can tell us a few stories about folks that we've met. But it's time for our first break. We'll be right back to hear more about migrant faith and mission. Stay tuned.
Catholic Charities' Refugee Resettlement Program has been especially busy this year, assisting individuals and families who have fled dangerous situations in their homeland, including Afghanistan and the Ukraine. The Refugee Resettlement Team helps with everything they need to start to rebuild their lives in a new country, including housing, employment, clothing, food, English classes, and referrals for legal and immigration services. The refugees are tremendously grateful for the compassion and practical help they're receiving, and they're giving back and helping each other plan for a brighter safer future. Volunteer opportunities are currently available for those who would like to be family mentors and tutors so children and adults can practice English. To learn more about these rewarding opportunities, call 312-655-7096. That's 312-655-7096.
This is year 44 for me teaching. When I started here, there were teachers here that had taught me when I was a student. Now I'm the old person. Right now, I teach junior high math. I love when kids find what I'm teaching to be fun and they get it. I see that light bulb go off and it's a thrill. People are always amazed. What? You're here for 44 years? It's hard for me to believe, frankly. I love what I do. Every summer I think, oh, I miss the classroom. Even on the weekends, I think I can't wait to get back on Monday and teach those quadratic equations.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs.
Do you have an old bicycle that's not being used? Consider donating it to Catholic Charities Veterans Bike Project of Lake County. Skilled volunteers are refurbishing bicycles to make them safe and ready to be used by veterans to get to and from their new places of work. We also gratefully accept financial contributions that are used to purchase bike helmets and other safety accessories. Our veterans have faithfully served the United States, and now it is our privilege to serve them. For more information on the Veterans Bike Project of Lake County, call 847-782-4219. That's 847-782-4219.
Welcome back to Mission Matters Live. I am Megan Mio, Director of the Global Mission Office in the Archdiocese of Chicago, and I'm here with Father Michael McAndrew, a Redemptorist priest and missionary with communities of migrants, particularly Hispanic communities. And Father Mike, before the break, we were learning a little bit from you about your journey to becoming a missionary priest, and particularly ministering with Hispanic communities in all different areas around the U.S., and how that wasn't an immediate plan, but it's the way things kind of worked out. And I think it sounds like your journey has been, there have been some surprises in there and some things that kind of worked out not the way that you thought that they would. So I wondered if you could talk to us in this segment a little bit about, over these past years of ministry, how have you met Christ in the migrant and in people that you have met? How has this challenged and deepened your own personal faith to do this kind of ministry?
I think I've gained a much greater respect for the traditions of our church. And the traditions that are important, especially around the sacraments. When Pope Francis said in paragraph 200 of The Joy of the Gospel, the poor are oftentimes denied the sacraments of the Eucharist, confirmation, sacraments of the church. I became very aware of that when I was doing the parish missions and preaching that mission team. One year I went to the Dalles, Oregon in November, and the growers of the cherry growers in that region asked me to come back in the summertime when the workers would come in for the harvest. And they were coming in from California and Mexico to do the cherry harvest. About 6,000 people would come into that community for that harvest. It was a very intense, very labor-intense crop. And it was a short term, about 4 to 6 weeks. And so I came out with a couple of lay ministers with me, and we said masses in the camps for a couple of years. And 2 years we said mass in camps, in different camps all over the area. And the second year I was there, I asked the people, I said, what is it that you need from us that I can't give you, that you're not getting from the church? And one woman said to me, we don't need you to be our social worker, our doctor, our lawyer. We need to be our priest. We have children who've never received the grace of sacraments of Eucharist and confirmation. And they're now 12, 14, 15 years old. And so I worked it out with the Bishop of Bend, Oregon, and with the priest there. And we decided to set up a team where we would have some seminarians come with me. We would run a 2-week summer school for kids to get ready for First Communion. And we did it. And the children came to the sacraments. We got people engaged in it. We had about 70 the second year. In the second year, I went and I took my mission team down to see the bishop, and he said, what do you think if the bishop comes and does the communion mass? And I said, well, that'd be great. People would love it. And the people did. But what was neat about it was he said, how old are the kids? And I said, well, half of them are 14 and older. So they ought to get confirmation. I said, Bishop, we only have 2 weeks to serve them. How can we get it done in 2 weeks? And he says, you only have the time that God gives you. You teach them and I'll confirm them. And Bishop Vasha came to work with me with these migrant children. And for a period of the next 11 years, we had a lot of kids receiving First Communion, confirmation. We had about 6 marriages, 150 baptisms. It was quite an extraordinary experience. What I am aware of is that we do a lot of social work for the poor. We do a lot of medical attention. Right now, with the crisis, that's literally what crisis ministry involves: caring for, getting shelter, food, lodging, keeping people alive. But there's also the need of giving people a sense of what their strengths and their weaknesses are. And what I found in that 11-year period out there in the Dalles, Oregon, was the gratitude of so many people, reminding them of the story of their faith. And I think that our faith has a lot to do with we need to provide a complete picture of what we need to do for people. We do well with we want to do well with the when I was on the border in recent times studying the border, you're overwhelmed by the tragedy of the moment. But there's also a need for bringing people into the life of the church and the life of their faith, and encouraging them to say, it's worthwhile what you're doing. That's the key thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, in a way, it's very humbling to hear how families that you've met were so desiring of sharing their faith with their children. Oftentimes, I think here in our diocese, we think about, well, we wish we could get families to come and bring their kids to religious ed, and then here these are families who would be willing to do whatever it took to get to pass their faith on to their kids, to have their children experience and receive sacraments, and a beautiful gift that you and the bishop were able to make that happen, even in kind of a short period of time, just given the realities of that way of life for people who are migrants. But I think it's sort of humbling in a way to think like, well, I take it for granted sometimes that I have easy access to the Eucharist. I have easy access to confession, things like that. Other folks might not have and wish that they did. Something that, I don't know, just kind of opens your eyes a little bit. I would also just ask if you could say a little bit about sometimes I think we forget, but what does our faith, what does our church teach us about caring for migrants? You mentioned, of course, ministry and pastoral care, accompanying, being part of a community with those who are migrants. But what more does our faith teach us about the migrant?
Well, I think that the migrant is a person who we have to understand. They're like our neighbors. I mean, they're not. I think that one of the things that when you hear some of their stories, you start to understand that they're not coming here just to find a job or that. I talked to a priest down in Mexico many years ago, and he said migrants do not leave their country of origin for hunger. There's food here, but the problem is they leave because of desperation. They can't see a way to find a regular order of life for their family, their children. They can't see a way through to the education of children, to seeing them have an opportunity. And it's desperation that motivates a person to leave their country of origin to come to this country. One of the things that I think it's easy to recognize right now is we're not seeing a tremendous amount of Mexican migration to the United States today. A lot of it's coming from Central America and South America.
Yeah, right.
The Mexican migration that's coming here today is coming from some parts of Mexico that have terrible problems with gang violence and that type of thing. But the Mexican immigration to America today is basically family unification and seeking to reunite families who have been separated because of policies.
Right.
But the crowd that's coming from Latin America, from Central America, from South America, it is a whole different world. And I know that Americans aren't quite aware of how different it is to come from a place because of poverty and hope and desperation from poverty, or coming from a country desperate because of war, political persecution, violence, gangs. That's a different element, and I think we're going to have a real different experience with the modern migrant.
Yeah. You know what? I would use the terminology "the signs of the times" to refer to that. This is a reality that we're only just beginning to understand, because I think for a long time a discussion of migration was about folks from Mexico. And you're right, things are changing. This isn't the same story that we've been telling for the last some years. And I think that your comment earlier about poverty is a big piece of it. The Bible has plenty to say about how we are to treat the poor. And the Bible has plenty to say about how we treat the stranger. And I think a big piece of that is a sense of community, that folks, when they arrive, are treated as brothers and sisters, as members of our communities, and people who are people of faith like us. That may be a big way that our faith can inform how we respond. And I know we're going to hear more from you with some very practical steps about how we can respond to a migrant that may come into our midst. But it's actually time for our next break. So we'll be back to continue our discussion with Redemptorist missionary priest, Father Michael McAndrew, El Padre Migrante. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
We are hiring. Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Chicago is looking for mission-driven individuals who want to help make a positive difference in the lives of people in need throughout Cook and Lake counties. Be part of a diverse, talented team of professionals in the largest human services organization in the Midwest. We are dedicated to helping people chart a more stable, happier future for themselves, and we accompany anyone in need, regardless of faith, gender, race, or ethnicity. Competitive salaries and generous benefits add to the satisfaction you'll have every day knowing that you're helping us amplify our impact in Chicago. To see our list of employment opportunities, visit CatholicCharities.net.
There is no doubt this life is short. It is in you I trust, to spread your truths, your goodness, and love. It is you who will give a leader to our church. Who will fill these shoes?
Did you know that Catholic Charities accepts car donations? If you're ready to free up space in your garage and put a stop to all those expenses that go along with owning a car, we will gratefully accept your donation, whether the car is running or not. You choose a pickup time that is convenient for you, and we will make the donation as easy as possible, free of charge. You'll receive a charitable donation receipt as well. We accept all types of vehicles nationwide, and you will know that your donation is made to Catholic Charities, an agency you can trust. To learn more about donating your car, call 877-786-4483. That's 877-786-4483. Thank you.
The Cemetery Ministry is a core ministry of our Catholic faith tied to the corporal works of mercy. It's comforting to know that our Catholic cemeteries are caring for the remains of our loved ones awaiting the resurrection. There are 44 Archdiocese of Chicago Catholic cemeteries willing to help you in your time of loss. Call 708-449-6100 or visit CatholicCemeteriesChicago.org. Catholic Cemeteries, serving the Catholic community since 1837.
You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Thanks for letting us be part of your morning. Now again, Catholic Chicago.
Welcome back to Mission Matters Live. I am Megan Mio, Director of the Global Mission Office in the Archdiocese of Chicago. You're listening to WNDZ 750 AM. And I have here with me Father Michael McAndrew. He has been in ministry with Hispanic and Latino communities, especially those who are migrants, for about 50 years now, a Redemptorist priest. And so far in the program, we've been hearing a little bit about Father Mike's experience working with different communities who have quite a story to tell, and all those relationships, individuals, and families that he's come across. So I wanted to ask, in this segment of our show, you mentioned at the end of the last segment that we're seeing more people with traumatic experiences, reasons why they left their home being dire, really desperate decisions to migrate. And that's something I think our audience needs to hear about. So I wondered if you could share with us some stories, sacred stories, of people's lives and how they have coped, how their faith has helped them, and what they've been able to share with you. So please, Father Mike.
This is a good question because I have to say that I believe it's quite a bit different today than it was when I first started working in Hispanic ministry. Yeah. 30 years ago, I would talk with people who were coming from Mexico or from Latin America. And most of the time, the people would say, well, I'm coming here to find a job. I'm coming here to send money back to help my family. Yeah. I'm coming here to reunite with my brothers and sisters who had already come here earlier. They got amnesty. They're coming with them. Mm-hmm. Some said they just were coming for the adventure. Our youth house, that's the type of community we were working with in Denver when I was there. So I became very comfortable with that group of people. But in recent years, it's been an awareness of that the border has changed a lot because of the arming of the border and the militarization of it and the difficulties of it. I was in, I took a sabbatical back in 2007, and I went down to Mexico and at that time, and there was a town that I was in Michoacan, and there were about 20 25 men who were going to the border the next day. They all were going. About 7 of them had legal entries, so they were citizens or they'd gotten green cards. So they would go up to the border with their friends, and they would go in legally. And about 18 of them were going up there for about half of them for the first time, and half of them third, fourth, fifth, sixth time going up to the border. This was 2007. It was not as militarized as it is today, but it was much more dangerous. And I remember talking to them about how it was crossing the border, and they said it was becoming more and more difficult. It was at a time when there was the militarization with the what they call them, the Minutemen were armed on the border and in Arizona. And one of the things that I remember one of the guys said, he says, we hope we don't see anybody with guns, but if we see somebody with a gun, we hope it's the migra, the immigration, because the people with guns were the robbers, the thugs on Mexican side, or the Minutemen who just didn't have much control. And they said if they meet a guy with a gun, they want it to be an immigration agent because they have rules.
Yeah.
It was interesting seeing that. That was 2007. It's gotten worse, and there's a lot of problems with when 7 months ago, my superior asked me, he says, would you go to Mexico for 6 months to study the northern parts of Mexico on the border? What is the reality of the foreign nationals coming into Mexico, residing there, or going onto the border to try to seek entry into the United States? And myself and another Redemptorist and a brother, 3 of us went and visited sites between San Luis Potosí. Pardon me. This picture that's there is from San Luis Potosí, a rail train, where the migrants under those trees, they're trying to jump the freight to go north. From Matamoros to Tijuana, we visited sites along the border, 32 shelters and service centers on the Mexican side. I was impressed with the amount of care given by the people who were the caregivers, giving food, shelter, medical attention, social work, and legal help. What was missing was a care for the spiritual, but I don't know how it would really be done at this time because they're in crisis.
Yeah.
The crisis is, I don't know how it would be done there. But what I saw among the people was we had an opportunity at times to visit with the migrants in the camps. When we visited with them, I noticed the difference between when I asked the question, what motivated you to leave your country of origin? It's a little better than saying, why did you leave your country of origin? Not so harsh.
Yeah.
But what motivated you to leave your country of origin?
Yeah.
And many people would start by saying, well, Father, you understand that the violence is going on in our country. One young man, 14 years old, said, after they murdered my father and my brother, I knew I had to leave. He was 12 years old when his father was murdered by gang members in his town. 2 years later, his brother was murdered. And at age 14, there was no hope for him to stay in his home country. And he came to seek asylum. There was a couple that came, and these were a very a craftsman, a carpenter, but obviously a very gifted craftsman. He knows what he's doing about construction, and he had a wife and 3 children. And he said the gangs were giving him letters saying, if you don't pay us so much money, well, your daughter will be raped. It'll be your fault if your daughter gets raped. And so he turned it over to the police. The police came in and tried to help him. Soon he got a note back from the gang people saying, you've turned it over to the police, now it's going to cost you more. And the police recommended him to geographically move. So he moved about 80 miles from where he lived to another part of his country to take up business in another part of the country. And his 12-year-old daughter, his 14-year-old son, and his 6-year-old daughter. and and his wife. They were there for about 7 or 8 months when the letters started coming back again. We found you. You can't get away from us. Well, that's the trauma that's going on in some people's lives. There are people who are suffering from persecution. There is violence going on in Latin America right now, in Nicaragua, that is against the clergy. There's been a bishop murdered, and 6 or 8 priests have been murdered in the last 6 months. There's a number of there's violence going on in these countries that are causing total disruption of the people. Right. The collapse of the economy of Venezuela is disastrous, with many people having no food, and they're just trying to make ends meet. And people are coming to the border, and many of the Venezuelans who come, the people who are coming up now to the border that I met in these camps, many of them are middle class. Many of them are educated. Yeah. Many of them had good jobs in their cities. They were bank tellers, they were nurses, they were teachers, they were professional people. There was an engineer from one community that came, and the threats to his family, he couldn't stay. And so I think we're having a very different type of migration right now. It's different from what it was 30 years ago when I saw people who were coming up from farms and from desperation of poverty. They're coming up now because of fear. And the amount of fear is, probably, anecdotally, probably about 70 or 80% of the people are coming because of some form of fear. The other thing that struck me was how long they've been on the road. There's many people who've been on the road for 2 to 4 to 6, 8 months. Some people up to 8 years. When you hear people say, "I left my country of origin 8 years ago," and you go like, "What have you been doing for? How do you survive with any sense of identity when you are homeless for 8 years?" And that's really what's going on in some of these folks. Yeah, we need to understand that the crises at the border that I'm talking about, it's not an American-only problem. Pope Benedict wrote in the Caritatis in Veritate that the mass migration of the world today is the greatest challenge the world will face, and it needs international cooperation at a level that we've never seen before, or it will just get worse. Yeah. And honestly, he was right. And I wish that we would recognize that our political leaders around the world are just not measuring up to the great challenge of what migration is about.
Yeah, there's many aspects to this. I was thinking while you were sharing about the idea that, our traditional image of missionary activity, at least within the church structure, is to send somebody. So from the U.S., I'm going to go out, I'm going to go to Nicaragua, and I'm going to be a missionary with a community that lives there. While that there may be a place for that, obviously there are needs in other parts of the world. There's also this reality of people moving, and this is just really a what's happening in the world for many reasons. Some of them obviously very serious, as you've described here today, and some folks on the move for quite some time of their lives. In a way, we can think about this as this is where the missions, people who we have thought about, we have to go out to them, they're coming to us. And they are now part of our community. These are our neighbors and brothers and sisters who we now can see right outside our front door sometimes. So this is a question about how do we recognize our neighbor, and I think we will talk about that in our last segment. It's time for our last break, but we will continue our discussion about migrant faith with Father Mike McAndrew in just a moment. Come right back.
At Catholic Charities, we want to remind you that we are here for anyone who is a victim of domestic violence or anyone who has a concern about someone they think may be a victim. Domestic violence affects millions of people each year, both women and men, of every race, religion, culture, and economic status. It includes physical, psychological, and emotional abuse, inflicted in both subtle and overt ways. The impact on children can be devastating. If you or someone you know are victims of domestic violence and you are looking for a place for healing and recovery, call us at 773-935-3434 in Cook County and 224-430-4977 in Lake County. A safer, happier tomorrow can begin today.
Welcome back.
Es fabuloso verlos.
Dobrze jest znowu być razem.
It's good to be together again.
After so many months apart, pandemic capacity limits have been lifted, and we want to welcome everyone back to church. We can all pray together again. And listen as our choirs lift their voices in song.
We've been together in spirit.
And now, when you are ready, our doors are open wide.
Nuestras puertas están abiertas de par en par.
Nasze drzwi są otwarte.
And we're here to welcome you back to Catholic Mass.
Catholic Charities has had the privilege of helping people in need in Cook and Lake County for more than 100 years. We would like to take this opportunity to thank our frontline workers who, despite the unprecedented challenges of the past 2 years, continue to excel at their jobs every day. From the warehouse staff members who pack boxes of nutritious foods for low-income seniors, to the dedicated WIC employees who have remained open for families with children under the age of 5, to our volunteers and restaurant partners who ensure that meals are available for those experiencing hunger, to our service coordinators and our professional counselors who continue their vital work in innovative ways, to our food pantry staff, and to all those who work at Catholic Charities Call Center, finding solutions for every person who reaches out to us for help. Charity is at the heart of all you do, and we salute you.
Welcome back to Mission Matters Live. I am Megan Mio, Director of the Global Mission Office, and I'm talking with Father Michael McAndrew, a Redemptorist missionary priest who has been engaged in Hispanic ministry with migrants in the U.S. for many, many years now. And we've been talking with Father Mike about your experience, the different types of ministries you've been engaged in, what our faith has to say, what you've learned about your own faith from this ministry. And then in this last segment, you were sharing with us some real specific stories of recent individuals and families that you've met and the kinds of real serious trauma and fear and violence that migrants have experienced and are fleeing from coming into the United States. And so in this last segment, I wanted us to talk a little bit more practically about, now that we know a little bit more, what can we do next? And we mentioned that you have a blog that you write for on a website, padremigrante.org, padremigrante.org. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it happened that 15 years ago, or no, about 10 years ago, I was leaving Fresno, and Fresno Diocese, I worked with a committee we called the Outreach Extraordinary Ministry Council. and they said, you need to write a book about your journey with migrants.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I can't write a book in 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
But they said, please write what because the priest won't believe what you've told us. So I told them that I wrote the book, and as it grew, it became really really my love story of with the migrant faith and how the faith of migrants touched us.
Mm-hmm.
When it was finished, the translator, for the La Fe del Migrante part, in Spanish, he said, "Padre, after this, you'll be called Padre Migrante." And so when COVID hit, I took the title Padre Migrante for my Facebook page, for my website, and nobody's called me that, but I have really walked with migrants for a long time. On the website, there's a blog, a daily blog, almost daily. I don't do it every day, but just about. And then there's a resource ribbon on the top, and the resource part of it says that at the bottom of the resource page is the book printed on the website.
Mm.
And there's a button down there where you can read it in English or in Spanish. You go right to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
You got it. And when you go on it, the reason why I put it on the website was because it's going out of print.
Mm.
And it really needs to be rewritten, not just reprinted.
Mm.
But so people can read it in English or in Spanish from the website. It's there. The whole book is there.
Okay. So it started with the
I've
book.
worked with Mike. Yeah.
And now the website is kind of a growth out of it. So the website started during the pandemic.
Yes. Yes. It was my way of trying to get some work to do while I was during the pandemic. And my community, some of my converts said they would help me with writing the blogs, and so far nobody's helped me. I've got about 400 blogs up posted over a period of 2 years.
Wow. Well, I mean, I was just gonna say you're just getting started, but 400 blogs sounds like you've been going for a while. You haven't run out of things to say. All right. Well, then you said you also have a Facebook page, and this is how people can kind of hear what's new, what new things you're reflecting on, new experiences that you've had. Is that what you write about in the blog?
Yeah, I write new experiences, what's going on, and sometimes I repost. Like today's article was a repost because I was going to get on this, and I didn't take time to write a new article.
Sure.
It was a repost from about a year ago,
okay.
And sometimes I do that to bring up the ones that I've used.
Mm-hmm. But the other thing is, I seem to recall, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you're also writing about not just, let me tell you stories of people I've met or my own personal stories. It's also really about helping people to hone their own skills in ministry and mission with migrants, right? So that others can take up that same ministry, correct?
One of the things about honing the skills of people who work with migrants, I'd like to say we need to develop a little different attitude of how we receive the migrant in our lives.
Sure.
This picture you have right now is from Allensworth. They were a desert community out in California,
mm-hmm.
and it was very much an abandoned community. And we had a broken down rodeo grounds that became the place where we taught catechism to the children. They had the mass out in the rodeo ground. The thing that I would like to say is, I would like to describe first responders, second responders, third responders to people who are migrants.
Sure.
The first response is what we see at the border today, and how how people are treated in the shelters, the service centers in Mexican side of the border and on our side.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the first response to a migrant coming into the country. I think we've been assuming once they get into the country, they come to their families, they live with their sponsor family, they go to our churches, and we expect them to somehow participate in our churches right when they first come.
Right.
And I call that the third response. There needs to be in between a manner of walking with the people who have gone through trauma and are now living in our midst and have gotten here, and we don't know how to engage them in the life of our community or our church or our parish. I think that a lot of our religious education programs are based on stability. And these folks have not had stability in their lives for a long time. And one of the worst things we have is the idea of having to go to Mass on Sunday, and people say, well, these folks don't go to communion. Well, we should be looking at the ones who have already gone to communion. They should be going to communion anyway, because when you're living in the trauma that they're living under, there's no obligation to go to Mass when you're living in crisis. And the crisis situations they're coming from, we need to understand them.
Yeah.
We need to be much, much more understanding in our catechetical approaches.
Yeah.
There are a lot of programs, and I see it, the worst offenders, in my opinion, are in our Hispanic communities, where I wish that our communities would pay attention to what the people have been going through. Many of the people are coming to our parishes and are finding a lot of rules and regulations for receiving the sacraments. And Francis was right when he said, we're denying access to the sacrament for children and for people who are poor. The thing is that we need to reach out and understand them. I would really want to say to catechists, priests, religious leaders, the poor have great faith. They wouldn't leave their country of origin without great faith. They have hope in a way that none of us could even imagine. Hope in the midst of terrible tragedy.
Right.
And yet we end up making them jump through hoops and jump through and we need to or fix our programs to receive them graciously, and lovingly. One man told me one day at a baptism for a baby, he says, Father, the rules and regulations of the church are worse than the rules of immigration. He said it's harder for us to get our child baptized than it is to get into the country. We should not be compared by a migrant with the government problems of dealing with immigrants.
Yeah.
That was a horrible comment, but it was a comment that was true.
That was an eye-opener. Yeah. Now, we only have one last minute left with you, Father Mike. Okay. The time just flies. But I wanted you just to say, so the person listening right now, what's the next thing that they could do to love their neighbor, to love their migrant neighbors? Give us a quick last soundbite, please.
Well, the next time you see someone who's working on your roof or your car or your house, say thank you to them. Say gracias. Say to them your gratitude. We need to be much more understanding of their presence.
Yeah. I think saying hello, introducing yourself,
say hello
wouldn't hurt. Yeah. Get to know people, talk with people, accompany. Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Father Mike, and for offering your wisdom and compassion for peoples moving in and around in the U.S., especially Hispanic Latino communities. Our church is blessed to have a mission leader like you who goes wherever the Spirit may call. And I'll remind folks again of that website, www.padremigrant.org, padremigrante.org. May you, Father Mike, continue to meet Christ in the lives of every person you encounter in your ministry. And that for our listeners, thank you very much. Thanks for listening. And remember, always be on mission.
Join us every Monday through Friday at this time for Catholic Chicago. You can stream our programs live or listen to past programs by visiting our website, archchicago.org, and clicking on Radio TV. And please connect with Catholic Chicago on social media.